friends, and welcome to the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tetreault, also known as Dr. T Loves Books, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I may be an old dog, but I'm always trying to learn new tricks. In each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. As a good friend likes to say, we're better together. So I hope this podcast will help school librarians connect with and learn from each other. The opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. And because school librarians always strive to be good digital citizens, I cite sources when using material that is not my own. Without further ado, let's get to this week's episode. Hey there, everybody. So my guest this week is me. We're going to see how this goes. I haven't done this before, but I was fortunate enough to be at Texas's Library Association conference, and it was amazing, as it was last year too. I've been fortunate enough to go twice now, and if you get the chance, you absolutely should go. It is really just incredible. But while I was there, I was talking about some lessons that I've shared with people in different ways. And one of the lessons that came up was building your own search engine. And when I talked about it, people's eyes got real big, like, oh my gosh, you can do that? And I realized, oh, maybe this is something that people aren't as aware of as I thought. This is something that I actually learned about when I was doing my graduate classes, and I figured it might be a good one to share out. So I also figured it'd be good. You know what? I should probably just run myself through the same kind of lowdown that I do with guests, because now I'm the guest. So maybe you want to know something about how I became a school librarian. So here's the shortest version. So I was an English teacher for 25 or plus years in both middle school and high school. I spent most of my time in the same middle school, and I really enjoyed it. But a couple of years back, right around 2015, 2016 or so, the librarian at my school had to be out for a while, for a couple of weeks. And he asked me if I'd be interested in kind of sitting in when I had prep periods to kind of just keep an eye on the library. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. So I liked being in the library. I liked being there to sub. It was really interesting to kind of be part of the library program. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And when he came back, he said, I'm thinking about retiring and you seemed to really enjoy being here. Have you got your library certification? Or maybe you should go and get it. I said, well, that's interesting. So I went, got in the program, realized how important school libraries are really by thinking about and seeing what kind of instruction school librarians get. I'd already gotten instruction on how to be a classroom teacher. I'd already gotten degrees in how to be a supervisor, a principal, an administrator. And so I'd seen a lot of different sides of education, but seeing school librarianship from the inside and being trained in it really made me see how incredibly important and valuable the school library program can be for our students. So it really sunk in how important it was to have good, strong library programs for students, for faculty, for the school. So I ended up going through the program. Literally a month after I got my certification, the decision was made to close my middle school's library because they were doing a big renovation, and they were supposed to renovate the library, but things went a little sideways and they found they needed the space for something else. So the library became science labs. The middle school lost the library. And so I continued to be an English teacher for a couple of years, but the supervisor of libraries and technologies in my district was a friend of mine. And I got my annual "what position would you like in the future" note that we can, make a request of, do I want to stay at the same level? Do I want to go to a different grade level? Things like that. And it kind of got me thinking, like, why don't I ask about being school librarian? Because the middle school, when they closed our middle school library, they had to start sharing library space with the high school. We're an attached middle school, high school complex. And the high school library is really out of the way for the middle school. It's a hike to get there. The high school librarian already had a full plate dealing with being the high school librarian. So the middle school really wasn't getting too much in the way of library services. They just weren't available. Like, there just wasn't an easy way for the middle school to get them. And so I went to the supervisor / friend of mine, and I said, look, it's good that they at least gave us some kind of an opportunity to have library services, but it's really hard for our school to take advantage of it. And I think I could really be useful in helping the middle school teachers and students take advantage of the materials, services that we do have access to that they may not even realize that they've got access to. Because at this point, it had been a couple of years. Literally, there were students who didn't know that our middle school had a library at that point. And the teachers had sort of fallen out of the habit of using the space as well, or thinking about the space. So the supervisor was on board. She said, that's a great idea. She took a little while. She did a whole lot of behind the scenes maneuvering and managed to finally make it so that I was able to become the middle school's library liaison, basically, for the complex. And just recently, I got a new principal. Our vice principal became our principal. She's a huge supporter of school library program. And I was very fortunate that she and I were kind of on the same page. And we managed to find some space in the middle school again. There's a room that used to be part of the library that was converted into a conference room that didn't get used on a regular basis, frequently enough that it was still a conference room, but something that could be used to also house books and be a library space. So that has recently come into being. And I've been really fortunate to be able to work as the middle school library liaison for the past couple of years and get things kind of moving forward there. So that's sort of my journey to becoming a school librarian. And along the way, while I was getting the certification for school librarianship, while I was taking the classes, I also was given the opportunity to write some curriculum. And the class that I was supposed to write a curriculum for was called Argument and Debate. And that class was meant to be an elective that all of the 7th grade students were going to take, so that by the end of 7th grade, they'd all have some basic knowledge, some basic skills in argument and debate, structures, styles, information that they could apply to other classes as well. Since I was taking my graduate class, or had just finished up my graduate class at the time, I had all these ideas about how school librarianship should kind of interact with students and what it can bring to the students and the staff. So I was able to take those ideas and incorporate them into this argument debate class, which basically became almost like a secret backdoor school library class for the 7th graders, and involved lots of research, lots of technology skills, information skills. So one of the lessons that I ended up writing for that class was how to build your own search engine, which I had learned about in my graduate classes. And I figured this might be something that the students would be able to take advantage of, or if not the students, maybe the staff. So I had put together this lesson called Building Your Own Search Engine. So it's a relatively straightforward thing to do. And Google actually makes it very easy because they have a custom search engine interface. And basically what it is you go to the website, and that'll be linked in the show notes, of course, and you sign in with your Google account. And once you do, it gives you the opportunity to start building your own search engine, which means that you get to choose what resources is the search engine going to look at when it does the searches that you ask it to do. So let me jump to the end. The end of the process is you end up with a search box that looks like a Google search box, and you can get a link to it, and you can send that to people, or you can bookmark it so you can get back to it very easily. And whatever you type into that search box, the search will be done, but it'll only be done on the list of resources that you have put into the custom search engine. So you get to choose, you get to decide what are the reliable resources that would be useful. And while we all know there's all sorts of great, reliable resources out there, and we know that when we can, we want students to get into databases, we know they're going to use online sources other than our databases. We know they're going to do open web searches. So having a custom search engine that I could build, that I knew all the sources were going to be reliable sources instead of just drawing from everywhere online, that helped me to kind of build up a couple of different kinds of search engines that could be applied to different kinds of projects and programs. I had actually built a couple before I made this lesson for a couple of different classes. That one was for a poetry class, or for part of our poetry program that we were doing in English. I built a poetry search engine that only looked at certain poetry websites so that I knew the students were going to be looking at particular kinds of poetry. I built one for one of the history classes. They were doing current events, so I built a current events search engine that only drew on reliable resources. So having these different kinds of search engines for different functions made me sort of realize, oh yeah, we can really channel students to good information when they're doing open web searches if we're aware of these tools that can help us kind of focus them in. And when you add in your ability to customize your Google search with different kinds of Boolean terms and different kinds of operators, then you really start to see some amazing abilities from these customized search engines. I mean, just on top of being able to do a Google search that is from reliable sources, you can also really narrow it in. So you're getting way fewer than the hundreds of millions or billions of results that you might get on a search. You're going to get that down to a much more manageable number. And when you start adding in different kinds of operators, you can really get it down to something that is very useful, something you could almost look at every result and really get some good, solid background information. So this lesson that I built, open web searches and building your own search engine, it's built along the same pattern as all of the lessons that I did for this argument and debate class. It starts with some reminders of some things that we want to have in our heads as we get into the lesson. And then there's a couple of videos to kind of set the stage for some of the things we're going to be thinking about. And once we get into the videos, we start talking about here's why you need to be thoughtful about what you're looking at online when you do searches, especially when you do open web searches, because we've got things like advertisements. We've got things like filter bubbles. So we've got to give a little bit of thought to, when we're doing open web searches, what are we really getting back from those searches? Where are the search engines pulling their information from? And we use Google as a term as though that's the word that means to search online. And Google is just one of many different search tools that's out there. If we're going to talk about Googling, we might as well turn it to our advantage and go to Google and use Google to build the engines that are going to really work well for us. So I give the students some examples of different kinds of search engines I've built. And I encourage them as we get started to think about what is the topic that you think you want to be able to do searches for. Because if you can narrow in on a specific topic, it's going to make your search engine much more accurate when you go searching for information. So they start by just brainstorming, like, what are some areas that I might want to do searches in? And some of the searches that students have done have been on sports. Some have been on dance. Some have been on video games. They have things that they're interested in. And by having them use their interests, that builds their understanding of why this can be a useful tool, because it can help them find those inquiry needs that they have in their own lives. But it also kind of translates into the idea that, oh yeah, you could also do this for a school topic. And that way you'd have a really good, reliable source for your school information too. So we start by thinking about what's the topic that we want to think about. We come up with a couple of different possibilities. And for each one of those possibilities, I then have the students do some thinking about what sources do you know of that might be good sources of information about that topic. Or if you're having trouble coming up with some, let's go online and see what are some of the sources out there. And then we can do a little bit of sifting of the sources and try and figure out, are there some that are better, more accurate, more reliable, ones that we want to rely on more over others? And so we're doing a couple of different skills there. We're thinking a little bit about, how do we assess where we're getting our information from? Where do we get our information from? Why do we choose those sources over others? So we've got topics. We brainstorm up, here's some possible sources of information that we could maybe get that search going in. And then we create basically a list of URLs that they're going to use to feed into the search engine. So now they've got a topic, they've got sources. We're going to make the search engine that's going to look at those sources for that topic. And there's a couple of little bits and bobs here as they go along, but it's basically as simple as create a list of URLs and copy and paste them into the custom search engine interface. I share with them a couple of different resources they might want to think about depending on what kind of search engine they want to build. And once they've got some of those different ideas put together, we start going into the actual, we've got the list of sources, we've got them set up in a particular way to put them into the search engine. Now we actually go to the search engine interface. So before they're going into the search engine interface, they're spending some time just brainstorming and thinking through what do they want and how are they going to find it? And so that's also adding to their thought process about search in general, right? So we get to the search engine interface. It's called Google Custom Search Engine. And it's just, if you want to go and check it out, cse.google.com. It's that simple. CSE, custom search engine.google.com. When you go there, it's got a sign in and then it's a, okay, get started, create a new search engine. So they do that. They start putting in their links to the different sources they want to use. And you can get as specific or as broad as you want when you start putting in the sources you want to look at. So you can go as wide as a domain. Like you could put in .gov as one of your search parameters or one of your search sources, and that would limit the searches to just .gov sources. Or you can get more specific and drill down and be like, no, I don't want all the .gov resources. I want just the FDA resources. I want just Medline Plus. You can add as many different kinds of sources you want. So even if you put .gov as one of the sources, you could also put .net or .org, and it'll search in all the websites that have those kinds of extensions or those kinds of domains. Or you can get real granular and say, I want you to look in this section of this website, or I want you to only look on this particular page of a website. If there was like one that had a whole lot of information that you really wanted to focus in on and be able to search through. So you can get as specific or as broad as you wish when you're entering in your different areas to do the search in. You come up with a name for your search engine. I try to name them as what they are for, like sports search engine, poetry. One of mine is Dr. T's reliable current events, so that I know, like, I made it, I know what it's for, and I know why I made it, right? So obviously I know why I made it, but as a title, it's good for the students and the staff to be able to see, like, here's what it is. Here's what this thing is that you are getting into. So once you've entered in your sources that you want it to search, you name it, you click create, and once you've created it, you have the option to get the public URL, which is the link that's going to bring you to the search box that has your search built into it. You can even do a lot of customizing of colors and fonts, and you can really make it look certain ways that you want. So having talked through the steps and having shown the students how to get into how this goes, I then turn them loose. I say, great, make your search engines, see what you can come up with, play around with the fonts, play around with the colors, make it the way you want it to look. You can have it display the results in different ways. You can have it include pictures or leave out pictures. Like, there's lots of different things you can play with in terms of the nitty-gritty details of it. So once you've got it and you've got the public URL, you basically just keep that URL someplace safe. I have a document where I've started laying them out so that I've got, here's what the name of it is, here's what it does, and here's the link to it. So that if somebody needs it in the future, I can pull it right up, send them the link for that particular custom search. So yeah, that's basically how that goes. And the students really enjoyed this chance to look sort of inside how search engines work. And they seemed to have a real good time with building their own engines and then going back and using them and showing them to their friends, like, check this out. It does this. You can do that. If you want to know about this topic, let me show you what I did. So it gives them that mastery and it lets them show off their knowledge and understanding while also expanding and extending that knowledge and understanding of the topic, which is really great. And of course, the teachers love that students know how to do this. I wish more of my teachers knew about this. And I'm trying to sort of, when I tell them that they can do these kind of things, they go, oh, wow, you can do that? And it's so easy to do. It just takes maybe 20 minutes to set up a real good one. You can set one up in minutes without, if you're not worried about how it's going to actually function, you could knock one of these out in no time. But if you take the time to sort of build up your list of resources that you really know are good, solid resources, you can spend a little bit of time setting one up. But then once you've invested that time on the front end, you know that you've got a good, reliable source on the back end that you're going to be able to use this for in the future. So strongly recommend, if you haven't yet, exploring that custom search engine interface from Google, cse.google.com. And of course, you can check out the lesson. It walks you through step by step. And hopefully it's something that you and your students and maybe your staff can get some use out of. Of course, we've got to go into our book break.
Book break. Sweetie.
So for the book break, I'm going to go with a book that I am currently reading, literally at this moment reading, not at this moment, reading just before I sat down to record. I was reading this book, and it's called The Meister of Decimen City by Brenna Raley. And it is a really fun and interesting book. I was at TXLA, I was walking around, I was thinking to myself, I just did this survey of my students and they said that they want more humor. So while I'm here, while I'm on the exhibitor floor, I'm going to walk around and see, can I find some humor books that my students might be interested in? And literally, as I had that thought, I turned a corner and there's a guy standing there with a book in his hand. He said, "Hey, would you like a free book that the author's going to sign for you?" I said, "Of course." So took the book, got in line, I'm looking at it, The Meister of Decimen City. And it's clearly a superhero book. And I'm a superhero nerd, so I was like, this sounds fun. And I'm looking at the description on the back, and it just really is grabbing me. And the tagline is, "No one cares that you cured cancer if you also cloned a horde of dinosaurs and let them rampage down the street." Which just sounds perfect to me. And as I'm reading a little bit about this sort of semi-supervillain genius who does all these things, I'm really just getting pulled into the little blurb on the back. And it's so interesting. I took it home, started reading it, and I have just been, it's an interesting book because at first I thought it was going to be for maybe like the middle grades, but it's absolutely not. It's much more for our upper YA / adult, definitely in upper YA range. And it's about a 20-something super genius / sometimes villain, sometimes not, who is really trying to figure out who she is and how that sort of fits into the world that she is part of. And the book does not suffer fools. It dives right in to the middle of what's going on, and it expects you to pay close attention, and it expects that the characters aren't going to explain things that they already know because they already know them. So there's not a lot of exposition. It's a lot of you figure it out as it goes along. You start filling in blanks. You have to do some work to get this story to really make sense in terms of all the pieces that are being thrown at you, because there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of different elements to it, but it's so good. It's so engaging. It's so enjoyable. And I love the main character who is just completely unsure of herself, despite being a literal super genius, smarter than anybody else on the planet. She's so full of insecurities. She's so full of these just moments of uncertainty, and she doesn't really kind of get why she doesn't seem to fit in anywhere. And as the story goes along, she starts to try to find her identity a little bit and figure out who she is. And she's also got all of this family baggage that she's trying to figure out, and all this emotional tragedy that she's had to deal with, and all different kinds of trauma that she's trying to overcome. And it's really interesting. It also has some interesting ideas about like, who are the heroes and who are the villains. Like, we tend to tell certain stories about the heroes that would almost equally apply to what we'd consider villains. And yet we tend to differentiate between these two groups. And of course, there's reasons why we separate heroes and villains, but it really asks us to think a little deeper. And one of the ideas in the story is that there's more to the story. And just because we get a neat storyline that seems in the headlines to tell us everything we need to know, there's usually more going on. And when the news story is over, the people involved still continue forward, and their stories are not finished just because the news story is finished. And sometimes there are lingering effects to things that go on that we don't maybe realize or think about, and we want to put those aside and say the story's done, let's move forward. But for the people who are engaged with these stories, who are part of these stories, maybe the story is not done, and maybe they're not ready to move on. And I feel like that hits on so many things that are going on in our society right now, in our world right now. So I'm really enjoying this story. I hope that you'll check it out because it's fun and it's interesting and it's got lots of pieces, lots of moving parts. It's different than other sorts of stories that I've read that are similar to this. It's got more depth to it, I would say, than a lot of the superhero-y kind of stories I've read, especially ones that tend to have some humor to them. So something to think about. This might be a good one if you've got your upper YA readers who might be looking for something a little bit deeper, or maybe looking for something a little different, that they're not into the superheroes usually, but this might be an entryway for some of those readers who are looking for something a little bit heavier to read, that might help them see that there's lots of great stuff that can be funny and interesting that's not necessarily something that we might first think of. And we might be able to look past the surface of our books to see that there's maybe more going on underneath. So that's all we got this week. I would love if you know other folks that have some great lessons. Maybe you're not ready to come and share on the show, but maybe you know somebody who's got a great lesson they have done, or you know that they've got this awesome activity that they've worked on. Why not either encourage them to reach out or send me some kind of contact information for them? I will reach out. I'll say, hey, you were recommended. We'd love to have you. I love hearing what other people have to say. I love getting to share what other people have put together and finding out about it. I mean, I have loved doing this podcast because I get to learn so much and I get to have these great conversations. So if you're not ready to share your lesson, maybe you know somebody who is or who might be, reach out, let me know. Or if you've got something, reach out, let me know. I was talking to Len Bryant, and he was saying, for some of us, the everyday might seem real simple and basic, but for somebody else, it might be revolutionary. Your everyday might be somebody else's revolutionary. So think about it. Maybe there's something you're like, oh, it's not really that cool. It's not really that neat. But there's people out there, and I'm probably going to be one of them, that are going to go, holy smokes, that's awesome. That's brilliant. It might seem simple, but it's not. It's something that not everybody's going to have thought of before. So think about it. Maybe reach out. Let me know. I would love to talk to more folks. I'd love to see some of the awesome stuff that folks are doing out there. So anyway, that's my pitch. That's my book. That's my lesson. I hope you're having a great one. And I'm going to be bringing you a couple of new guests in the near future. And I'm looking forward to hearing from a lot of you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for checking out this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes, which include not only a link to the lesson, but also links to the SLLN website, home to a curated list of free upcoming virtual events and resources for school librarians. It's easy to become a member of the network. Just visit the site and use what you like. If you have an idea, a question, or a lesson you want to share, you can email schoolliblearning@gmail.com. That's school, L-I-B, learning@gmail.com. Know someone with a great school library lesson? Let us know. Until next time, be safe, be good, and be well.